Shalom, shalom, brothers and sisters. Yeshua Jews out there, defenders of the Torah. This is a video that's long overdue. And I feel that we need to defend our brother, the Apostle Paul. And he has gotten such a bad rap because many people are saying that he preached against the law of God, the Torah. And many of those people don't understand that Saul, before he became Paul, was a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. But first, we have to establish the fact the Antichrist church is definitely confusing a lot of things. So, one of the things that that I just got faced with recently is like the Talmud was not even written back in Jesus' time. Well, it wasn't compounded, but the Talmud in oral law did exist, and Yeshua referred to it several times. Now, I can't believe that I have to go down this road saying that the Talmud existed. It's like saying that Jerusalem didn't exist because it was called Salem. The place was still there, that Melchizedek was king of Salem, which became Jerusalem, so on and so forth. It's a play on words that they try to use, the Talmud, the Mishnah, and so on and so forth. So first we need to establish that, yes, these oral traditions did exist in order to defend Paul, okay? Because Paul was brought up observing what today we call the Talmud. All right, back then it was the oral law or the elders. So let's go down here and look at this post. Many today claim that the Talmud did not exist in Yeshua's day, as if this means he could not have been referring to it. However, this argument is misleading. While it is true that the written compilation known as the Talmud, the Mishnah and the Gemara, was finalized centuries after Yeshua, the oral law itself, the traditions of the elders, absolutely did exist, and this is precisely what Yeshua confronted. The oral law in Yeshua's day. In the Gospels, Yeshua repeatedly clashes with the Pharisees and scribes over what he calls the traditions of men. We read here Mark 7:8, "For laying aside the commandments of God, ye hold the traditions of men, as the washing of pots and cups and many other such like things ye do," which you can find this in the Talmud. All right? Matthew 15:3, "Why do ye also transgress the commandment of God by your tradition?" You see? He's referring to that. The Hebrew culture, these, quote, traditions were called Torah shebe'el peh, literally, the law that is upon the mouth, or oral Torah, right? It was believed to have been passed down orally from Moses through Joshua, the elders, and finally to the Pharisees and their teachers. Oh, like, really, you're going to believe that? There was this secret book passed down orally from Moses. Come on. We all know the idolatry of the Israelites, of our ancestors during the Judges period. It was, and these people writing these, secret books. Come on. This body of rulings, how to keep the written Torah, was already being codified verbally and taught authoritatively by the religious elite of the Second Temple period. We all know when Yeshua came during the Second Temple period. So while it wasn't yet written as the Talmud, it was the same system of interpretive rulings later recorded in it. So from the oral law to the Mishnah. So after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, the Pharisaic teachers, now called rabbis, feared that their oral traditions would be lost. So to preserve them, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Judah the Prince, compiled these oral rulings written from around 200 CE. This became the Mishnah. The Mishnah is divided into 6 orders, covering agricultural laws, festivals, women, civil laws, sacrifices, and purity. It represents the first written record of what had previously been spoken in the synagogues and rabbinical schools, the same traditions Yeshua exposed. The Gemara and the final Talmud. Over the next few centuries, rabbis in 2 major centers, Israel and Babylon, discussed and expanded upon the Mishnah. These discussions were written down as Gemara, which literally means completion. Thus, the Talmud study or learning is made up of the Mishnah, the written oral law, and Gemara, rabbinical commentary and debate on it. It just went from bad to worse, really. There are two main versions. The Jerusalem Talmud, Talmud Yerushalmi, compiled at 350 CE. Babylonian Talmud, Talmud Bavli, completed at 500 CE. The Babylonian Talmud became the dominant authority in the rabbinic Judaism. So let's discuss Yeshua and the traditions of the elders. When Yeshua rebuked the Pharisees, he directly referenced these oral interpretations and extra commandments. Notice this in Matthew 15:6. Thus have ye made the commandment of God of none effect by your tradition. He does this over and over again. When he was not rejecting the Torah, he was not rejecting the Torah of Moses. He was restoring it, like we should be doing today. Yeshua's argument was that the oral law often contradicted the written law, replacing obedience with human interpretation. So, for example, the Pharisees taught loopholes for vows. And, Mark 7:11, they added ritual washings not commanded in the Torah. They imposed Sabbath burdens not written in the law. You see, these are the very principles and rulings that later found written form in the Mishnah and Talmud. Here I have a chart, the historical continuity, where you have the period of time, the oral traditions stage, and then the written form. So, when Yeshua condemned the traditions of the elders, he was rebuking the same system of human interpretation that later took the written form as the Talmud. It didn't suddenly appear after him. It grew out of the same Pharisaic oral structure that he opposed. So what can we conclude? This is technically correct that the Talmud as a book did not exist during Yeshua's ministry, but it's equally true that its teachings, methods, and oral rulings absolutely did. And those are precisely what Yeshua and his disciples resisted. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy, Luke 12:1. So Yeshua exposed the oral law, claimed equal or even higher authority from that of God's written word. We see the same thing going on in the Antichrist Christian church, where the Pope can change God's laws. So this oral law evolved through the Mishnah and Gemara and to what we now call the Talmud, monument to the very traditions that he declared nullified the commandments of God. Which brings us to our wonderful, beloved brother, the Apostle Paul. Paul and the law of God, misunderstood apostle or defender of the Torah. Which one was he? Now notice Yeshua says in Matthew 5:17, think not that I come to destroy the law or the prophets. What's the law? The Torah. What's the prophets? That includes the law and the Tanakh, right? So I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. So there's been a lot of debate about the Apostle Paul. Some claim that he preached against the Torah because they're not aware of this. Okay? As if he were introducing a new religion apart from the law of God. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. When we look closely at Paul's writings and his background, we find that he was not speaking against the Torah itself, but against the traditions of men, those Pharisaic additions that distorted the pure commandments of God. It's very important to understand this. Now let's talk about what Paul says about himself. Paul the Pharisee, he himself stated, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee, Acts 23:6. He was raised under the strict instruction of Gamaliel, one of the most respected rabbis of his day. Paul understood the oral law, the traditions that later became part of the Mishnah and the Talmud. These traditions, though religiously zealous, often went far beyond what God commanded. It tied heavy loads, put them upon the shoulders of men. Some of them were just outright ridiculous, as we address at godscommands.com. Now, when Paul speaks of the law of sin and death, or of being no longer under the law, he's referring to these human ordinances and this legalistic mindset that sought righteousness through works rather than through faith and obedience from the heart. He never condemned the Torah. In fact, he said plainly, the law is holy, and the commandment is holy, and just and good, Romans 7:12. Paul did not reject the Torah. He rejected the misuse of it. Now, Yeshua's own words. Let's look at Yeshua's words on the law. Yeshua said clearly, Matthew 5:17 through 19, that he did not come to destroy the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them, meaning to bring them to their full meaning and purpose. He even warned that whoever breaks the least of the commandments and teaches others to do so will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Then later on in that same chapter, Yeshua rebuked the scribes and the Pharisees for not keeping the Torah, but for perverting it through their oral traditions and hypocrisy. He accused them of making the word of God of none effect by your tradition in Mark 7:13. This is the same conflict Paul confronted throughout his ministry. People are like, oh, you're speaking against the Torah. No, he wasn't speaking against the Torah. He was speaking against through things like the Talmud, So what actually changed, though? Now, there were a couple things that actually changed. Paul taught that through Yeshua the Messiah, the two specific things were fulfilled and transformed. Number one, the circumcision of the flesh became the circumcision of the heart and mind. The covenant of Abraham included circumcision in the flesh as a physical sign. It was a physical sign for the Messiah. Yet Paul explains that this was a shadow pointing to something greater, the inward circumcision of the heart and spirit. Notice what he says here, Romans 2:28-29. For he is not a Jew who is one outwardly, but he is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart. Now, why this? Well, when Yeshua came, right? So the covenant was made with Abraham, with the circumcision. Remember how he had to circumcise himself and everybody else, but he was he was chosen by God before the circumcision. But he established this covenant. Why did they have to do it? They had to do it until the seed, which was the Messiah, came. Right? Now that the Messiah came in the flesh, right? In the flesh, and was transformed to his heavenly spiritual body, there's the difference for it. So that circumcision started out being a sign in the flesh, a covenant made with Abraham, until Yeshua the Messiah came. Then, after he came in the flesh, the circum of the flesh was no longer needed, because it was the Messiah had come in the flesh. You understand? But now circumcision of the flesh was not needed, but the circumcision of the heart was definitely needed. So now think about that for just a second. Now, can anyone become a Jew? Yeah. Circumcise your heart and mind, obey the Torah. You take the Torah on through faith. You see, you start obeying the commands of God through faith. But that was given through Moses. The circumcision was given through Abraham, the circumcision of the flesh, right? But now the circumcision lives on in our hearts and minds. Nothing wrong with getting circumcised. Nothing wrong with not being circumcised in the flesh, as long as you have the circumcision of the heart. So let's go on to the second thing that happened. Animal sacrifices. Once for all time sacrifice from Yeshua the Messiah. So the Levitical sacrifices served as a continual reminders of sin, but they were temporary coverings. When Yeshua offered himself as the Lamb of God, he became a propitiation, the perfect atonement that no animal sacrifice could ever accomplish. You don't have to do it over and over again. Notice Hebrews 10:14. For by one offering he has perfected forever those who are being sanctified. Through the one offering of Yeshua the Messiah. He was the Lamb that was accepted by God. So thus the priesthood and sacrificial system changed. Not the Torah itself. The moral and righteous instructions of God remain eternal. All them laws and commands that he laid down, you should still be observing and doing, as Yeshua said in Matthew 5:17 through 19. Yet you would not sacrifice your lamb, you see, because we have the best of the best. So going back, so those two things were ended, the circumcision of the flesh, covenant with Abraham, and the animal sacrifices, which Moses laid out what you had to do, right? Okay, but the Torah still stands. Paul's writings harmonize perfectly with Yeshua's words when you understand about this, about the traditions of men. So Paul's writings harmonize perfectly with Yeshua's words when understood in their proper context. He never taught believers to abandon God's commandments. Instead, he taught that obedience must flow from faith and love, not from a vain attempt to earn righteousness through rituals, man-made decrees. Oh, I'm going to wash my hands up to my elbows, before I touch my Bible, or something like that. Notice what he says at Romans 3:31. Do we then make void the law through faith? God forbid. Yeah, we establish the law. See, we establish the law. What law is he speaking of? The Torah. See, he speaks of both. So the Torah, the law of God, remains the foundations of righteous living. Through Yeshua, we receive the power of understanding and keep it with a pure heart, not in the oldness of the letter, but in the newness of the Spirit. So, the Apostle Paul was not a traitor to the law of God. He was one of its greatest defenders. His message was the same as Yeshua's. Keep the commandments of God, but do so with a circumcised heart, right? Don't do it because, I was born this way and this is what my parents taught me, so I'm just going to keep doing it. It's different now. Reject those traditions that corrupt the word and return to the simplicity and purity of God's Torah. You see, since Yeshua came in and he opened the kingdom of God to the Gentiles, no matter where they were at, in Jerusalem or anywhere, you see, anybody can become a Jew. Anybody can change their religion to Israel, to becoming an Israel Jew, because you will be a Jew of the heart, you see. Never once did he say, I want to create a new religion, and you guys are going to go over there. How confusing is that? No, he gave us the Torah for a reason. And I want to tell you guys something here. The Torah is absolutely amazing. I mean, just think of it. While other gods are saying, we want you to sacrifice your children. I want you to work harder. You must do this, do that. The law of God is exactly the opposite. It's like, you got 6 days to get your work done. On that seventh day, I don't want you to do nothing. I want you to sit back, relax, do no work. I want you to take it easy, and appreciate me and my commandments. You understand? How about the law, the dietary laws? Don't eat anything unclean. Think about that for a second. Then think about all the health problems people have today because of what they eat. You see, there's the dietary commands are great and wonderful. If you refuse to eat all that junk that people are putting in their bodies that Jehovah told us was unclean, you're way ahead of the game. Now, how about or the way we dress? He says, do not mix different fibers together, like wool and linen or wool and cotton, stuff like, but we're 100% all the same. Now, you may think to yourself, well, that's just a ridiculous law. But today, they have done studies, the advantages of wearing something that's woven all of the same material. There's these frequencies and flows through your body that flow with greater ease when you do that. Whereas when you mix the fibers, it screws up the frequencies in your bodies. You see? It's just so amazing. You're just way ahead of the game by observing the Torah. The Torah was never put there as a hindrance. The Torah was never, for example, it gives you laws of moral conduct. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, do not commit adultery. What is the problem with that? This stuff, a lot of people like, the curse of the law. They're not talking about, he's not speaking of the Torah. The curse of the law was the oral traditions of men that Yeshua spoke of and that Paul elaborated on in great detail. But the Antichrist has got you to believe that Paul was speaking against the law of God, which that could not be further from the truth. And it was so very important for me to make this post to defend our brother Paul, that never spoke against the law of God, but spoke against the traditions of men, and would definitely speak against the Talmud today. Much love. Shalom, shalom.